Salvete! Today we're continuing with Pliny's letter 616 about Mount Vesuvius, starting with line 27. This is Magister Muth. Let's get into it. So last time we left off with Pliny the Elder, the Avunculus, receiving a letter from a friend named Rectina, who lives at the base of the mountain, saying, "Help! We need ships to escape." Now, with that context, Ile, that guy, once again, this is Pliny the Elder, the avunculus, the uncle. That guy, vertit, he turns what? His consilium, his plan. Basically changes his plan. And now we need to look for some structure here. Well, I see a quote, probably a relative pronoun with its verb, which leaves obit as our main verb and incohaverat as our subordinate verb. And so ob eo is ob in the way of or in front of plus eo ire to go. So if you go in front of something, you're going to meet it. And so what does he go to meet or perhaps undertake? He undertakes the thing which, so there's an implied direct object, maybe id quod, the thing which incohaverat, which he had begun, pluperfect, the thing which he had begun, being an object there, with a studioso animo. So the thing which he had done started with a studious mind, namely exploring the cloud. Wow, that's a fascinating natural phenomenon. So he obit, he went to meet that thing, now with a maximo animo. So we have a contrast here and the ellipsis of the noun again, animo. So he started with a studious mind, now he's meeting it with a greatest mind. We could think magnanimous, a magnus animus, great-hearted, basically a heroic attitude he's now approaching. So he's changed from just scholarly interest to a rescue mission. Now he's going to jump into action with a bunch of quick present tense verbs, often without conjunctions, a syndeton for those of you keeping track back home. Deducit. So he leads out the quadriremes. That's a ship with 4 banks of oars, so much bigger than a Liburnica, his little personal ship. This is a massive warship. So he launches them, leads them out, and he ascendit, he climbs up or gets on board. Ipse, he himself does this. Non modo, we have a not only for something, but for something else. And here we're going to have a dative, I guess maybe a dative of reference or interest for the person involved. So he's getting on board the ship not only for Rectina, but for many people. And Pliny the Younger, the writer, is going to explain what does he mean by that. Well, erat, there was, enim, that's a logical connector, for there was a frequens amoenitas, which is a third declension nominative. Amoenitas from the adjective amoenus, which means pleasant, is pleasantness. So there was a frequent or crowded pleasantness of the ora, of the shore. Perhaps in more idiomatic English, the shore was crowded due to its pleasantness. Because people love living in these beautiful seaside areas, as anyone who looks up pictures or visits the Bay of Naples will surely agree. All right. So that's why there's so many people living there, the multis, and he ascends the ship, also described as laturus. And once again, we have to think, where does that stem latus come from? It is our pesky verb fero. Fero fere tuli latus, to bring. And since he's laturus, that's a future active participle about to bring help, or gonna bring help. All Right, so he sets off on his rescue mission, and he properat, sorry, that's a verb, he hurries where illuk, there. And this is specifically a to there, to that place, and unde is a from where. Or if you really like, you can say thither and whence. So he hurries there from where alii, other people, fugiunt. Isn't that a very brave thing to do in our narrative? Where people are fleeing, he's heading straight into it. Que, we have this and, another clause. And let's look for our next verb. It looks like it is tenet. He holds. What does he hold? A cursum. Literally from curo to run. This is where we get a course or a running in a certain direction. And he holds a direct or rectum cursum, a straight course. And we actually have a second object here. We're going to need to imply an et or a syndeton. He holds straight gubernacula, which is related to a gubernator, the person who steers a ship. So straight helms or straight steering. And in the plural collectively, we can say straight direction. And he holds that course in periculum, accusative with the motion showing into danger. And why is he sailing straight into danger? Well, our subject, the uncle, he is solutus, having been loosened or freed. Now we're going to have an ablative of separation, freed from metus, from fear. In fact, he's free from fear so much, so freed from fear, ut that, and when we have that trigger word saying so something that, we're going to call that ut clause a result clause with a subjunctive verb. So freed from fear that. Now let's look at our subjunctive verbs. Well, I see deprenderat, that's actually not subjunctive. It looks like there's some other little ut clause going on here. But our verb of the first ut is going to be dictaret and enotaret, imperfect subjunctives. So he was so fearless that he was dictating and notare, noting out. What's he noting out? Omnes, all the accusative object, motus. That's a fourth declension plural. All the motions with our genitive phrase of that bad thing, that evil thing, namely the volcanic eruption. And another object, once again, no et, and he's also noting all the figuras, all the shapes, as, now here ut with an indicative, I've given it away. Ut with indicative is as, it's not a so that, and I'm actually going to say this clause more ends here. So as he deprenderat, relate to comprenderat, comprehend, as he grasped them, oculis, with his eyes. So he's so calm, so fearless that he's even taking notes and scientific observations, dictating them to a scriba who would be writing them down as he's approaching the catastrophe. Carrying right along. Yum! Now the cinis cineris, where we get incinerate, that is ash. The ash incidebat. It was falling on the navibus, on the ships. Note that this is a compound verb, in plus cado. Compound verbs often take a dative object in the sense caused by the prepositional prefix, rather than a typical accusative. So you fall on, since fall doesn't usually take an object, you fall on a dative. Ash was falling on the ship. And quo, we might notice, looks like a ablative relative pronoun, by which accederent, by which they were approaching closer. Perhaps better in English, as they were approaching closer. By as much as they were approaching closer, ash was falling on the ship, and it was falling calidior, one L, that's hotter, and densior, denser. Yam, we have yam here. That's a nice example of anaphora. keeping it vivid and showing the buildup of things that are happening. Now, pumikes, and we don't have another verb, so I think we're going to have to imply another incidebant. These pumice stones, which are the porous volcanic rocks that are actually surprisingly light, kind of look like a sponge. Even pumice stones and lapides, that's our other noun, and rocks, stones that are nigri, black, ambusti, scorched, perfect participle, and fracti, broken. How? By the igne, by fire. So all of those adjectives are going to go with lapides. Those two things were also incidebant, were falling. So it's not just ash, but it's rock and these charred rock fragments. Yum! The anaphora continues. And now we have a subitum vadum. Notice that, once again, no verb. So we have vadum, that's a place you wade. It's a shallow area that is sudden. So I think we want to put an erat in there. There was a sudden shallow, and the litora, we have another quay connecting this and the shores were obstantia, standing in the way, opposing them. How? By the ruina, by the ruin, literally the downfall from ruo to rush or fall, by the downfall of the mountain. Now, what does that mean? It's getting hard to sail because there's a tidal wave coming, which makes the seawater recede before the wave hits, and there's lots of stuff on the shore, rocks and debris, causing the shore to be standing against their approach. So, unfortunately, they're not able to get straight to Rectina at the base of the mountain where he hopes to go. And it might help us to quickly look at a map. Steadman provides a great one in his commentary. They started at Misenum. He launches the ships, and he's probably trying to go somewhere at the base of the mountain around here, but he can't quite get there. And the question is, what does he do next? Cunctatus, describing our subject, still Pliny, and this is a deponent perfect participle, which means it's an active meaning having delayed. Having delayed paulum a little bit, and he's delayed. We're actually going to take an indirect question here. He's delayed, basically pondering whether flecteret, whether he should bend, think reflect, he should bend or turn retro back. So as he's delaying and considering this, soon he inquit. That's going to be our next verb. He says, that's actually our main verb. He says to someone, to the gubernatori. That's the person who minds the gubernaculum, the steersman or the helmsman. He says to the helmsman, who is described by a dative present active participle, monenti, who is warning. And what is he warning? We're going to take a nice indirect command in the subjunctive here. He is warning that he faceret, that he do this, basically, that he acts thus. So just to review that, that's a little dense. Cunctatus, so having delayed a little, whether he should turn back. He soon says to the helmsman, who is warning that he should do just that. He says, Fortes fortuna juvat. That's our help verb, and our nominative subject is fortuna. Fortune helps, or perhaps favors, the fortes, the brave. And therefore, he commands the helmsman to pete, to seek or go after Pomponianus, which it turns out is one of his friends who lives in Stabii. And we are going to start with a nice locative in Stabii. So let's look at our map for a moment again. Saying I can't get to Rectina, therefore I'm going to turn to Stabii. So he's actually deflected and heading here to Stabii, which is in that nice fold of the bay, still close to the volcano, ultimately destroyed as well, but a little further away from the immediate action. All right, so at Stabii, erat diremptus. This verb, diremptus, means to be separated or divided. So we have he had been cut off by the sinu medio, by the uh, middle of the bay, by the bay going in between. And uh, and I think the implication here is that he in Stabii, with the coast going like this, the city's here, the volcano's here, there is a nice bay in between, cutting off Stabii from Mount Vesuvius. And here we're probably talking about, well, who's in Stabii? This is Pomponianus, the friend. And so he's cut off from the mountain by the bay in between, gives them a little reprieve. And now in the dashes here, Pliny's going to explain the geography a little more. He doesn't assume his reader has a map or knows the area. For mare, that's our neuter singular subject, infunditur, the sea is poured back, sensim, that's little by little or gradually, with the litoribus, with the shores being circum actis, from ago agere, to drive, driven around, and curved. Uh, I take this as an appellative absolute describing the circumstance there. So we can see in this picture of a shore is curved and kind of driven around, so the sea is poured back in a way. So there, ibi, in Stabii, quamquam, although, nondum being not yet, although not yet with the periculo appropinquante, nice ablative absolute. So although the danger wasn't approaching yet, tamen, nevertheless. When we have an although, we're usually going to expect a tamen to complete the idea. Nevertheless, uh, with the danger conspicuo, this still is going to refer to danger. The danger, although it's not yet approaching, is definitely conspicuous. And proximo, and it is nearest when it cresceret, kind of as or when it was rising. So Stabii, it's not in danger yet, but it's clearly next in line, and the danger is getting closer. So therefore, Pomponianus at that place, at Stabii, he contulerat, once again from Pharaoh, Tuli, he had brought together or loaded the sarkinas, the baggage, in naves, onto the ships. And Pomponianus here is described as certus. He is certain of something, certain of flight, fugioing. If, now we have a condition here, if the ventus contrarius, the contrary wind or the opposing wind, recedisset. That's to sit down again, to reside. I think subside catches it better in English. And notice it is a pluperfect subjunctive, which means it is a condition that is in the past and contrary to fact. So did the opposing wind subside? No. If the contrary wind had subsided, but we know it didn't. So he's sitting there with a ship ready to go in Stabii, but the wind, unfortunately, is pinning them in, and they can't sail away. All right. Now, we're going to have what's called a connective relative again, quo. By this, or by which, or by this thing we just talked about, namely this wind, we can put vento in. By this wind, then, Avunculus meus, my uncle, namely Pliny the Elder, was invectus. And I think we want to add an est to make that a full verbal form. He was conveyed in by that wind. In fact, that wind being secundissimo, being most favorable. The word secundus literally can be second, as in numbers, but it can also mean good or favorable, deriving from the idea of the Romans taking a second omen if their first omen wasn't good and what they wanted. So Pliny sails straight into the situation because the wind is bad for leaving, but it's great for entering Stabiae. And we now have a quick succession of actions. He complectitur, he hugs, who? The trepidantem, a person who is trembling, namely Pomponianus. He hugs him, he consoles him, he urges him. Another example of a syndeton, showing the quick pace of the narrative. He's not even bothering with conjunctions. Bam, bam, bam. And he's going to console him. Yeah, and now here the que. So actually, he's not urging him to do something. This and we have to go to our next present tense verb. He iubets. He orders something. He orders de feri, him to be brought. That's a passive infinitive. Where? In balideum, into a bath. Why would he do this? Here, going back to our ut, this is going to be a purpose clause. Why does he order him to be brought into the bath? So that he would lay near it. That's to soften, make light, lighten. So he would soften the timorem, the fear of him, Pomponianus again. How? With his securitatis, his being without cura, without care. So security comes from feeling carefree, with his carefreeness, I guess, his security. The idea here that Pliny knows it's bad, but if he acts like everything's normal, he's going to calm down the people whom he is leading. And what else does he do? Well, lotus, this being a perfect participle from lavo, lavare, to wash, having been washed, he akubat, he lies down, he canot, he has dinner, and we have two possible options here, out, either, and or. So either being hilaris, cheerful, that's where hilarious comes from, or similis, similar to a hilaris, to a cheerful person. And Pliny the Younger editorializes, quod est aeque magnum, which is equally a great thing. The idea here being that, once again, he's keeping calm, and the fact that even if he's not actually hilaris and is just acting like it, that's very helpful for his panicked companions. So you can make up your own mind whether that was the best course of action and the quality of Pliny's leadership. We'll pause here and pick up next time. Walete!